Hello Year 8 and welcome back to your history lessons. Now we are starting a slightly different topic to the Industrial Revolution today. From now until the end of this year, we are going to be having a look at the Transatlantic Slave Trade. Now this ties in alongside the Industrial Revolution, so they're happening pretty much at the same time. However, the Transatlantic Slave Trade starts a little bit earlier than the Industrial Revolution, but the important thing to note is that they do run alongside one another. Now, the reason I don't have a PowerPoint slide up in front of me just yet is because I wanted to show you the worksheet that you should be completing. Now, let's take us back to our Google Classroom. For instance, I'm using 8M. 8L, yours will look exactly the same. So, here's our classroom page. You have a welcome, and you will have already have seen this. If we go to classwork, you will see there's a new topic, the Transatlantic Slave Trade. You're going to click Lesson 1, What Do We Know? And here are your instructions. So read through all of these, and then you have the documents, the slides, and there will be a link to the video, but I'm in the process of making it, therefore it's not there. You need to click the lesson video and the documents. The only reason you would use the Google Slides or the PowerPoint is if the video isn't working, okay? So what I'm going to do is click the document and it will bring this up for me, okay? This is what I'm going to write directly onto, okay? So I will just click and start typing. Once I'm done, you will have a turn in button here. Yours won't say share, yours is a student version, so it will say turn in. Once you have completed all of the activities, all you need to do is click turn in. That is it. You do not need to download it, you do not need to try and edit it in any way. You are just completing this worksheet, okay? I hope that makes sense. Please let me know if you have any questions. But for now, I'm going to get rid of those tabs and we are going to get on with the lesson. So, the first thing I'd like you to do, and this is an activity on your worksheet, is to identify what all of these items on the screen have in common. Now, you can be as specific as you like. You can make reference to specific sources that are on the screen, or you can write a summary sentence of what you think these things have in common. Once you have done that, play the video and we will move on. Okay, so on your worksheet, you will see that you have two columns. One is for the British Empire and one is for an African empire. What I'd like you to do is the images that are on your worksheet, you are going to drag them into which column you think they belong. Which of the images on here belongs to an African empire and which belongs to a British empire. So drag the images into the column you think they go into. Again, pause the video and come back when you are ready. Okay, so we have lots and lots of different images going on here, lots of things that may give away where they come from. So you have the materials in the buildings that might identify where these buildings are. You have perhaps the clothing that people are wearing that might give away where these people are, but also potentially you could be looking at the actions of people. Now, this comes from Tudor England. This is a piece of artwork from that time period, and as we know, it was a lot of turbulence, a lot of violence taking place. Here you see it's a lot calmer, a lot more relaxed, but we do start to see something going on in the background because look at what is happening to these people. Okay, they're dressed significantly differently to how other people are being dressed, and they're also chained up. So it gives us an insight into what life in these places might be like. Very, very violent, very unethical, and we're going to take a deeper look into those. Okay, so let's do a little bit of source analysis then. On your worksheet, you have 3 columns that you need to analyse sources from. So we've got sources 1, 2 and 3, which we will have a look at. Sources 1, 2 and 3 are also on your worksheet, but I will show them on slides as well. You need to identify what it is. So is it a painting? Is it a picture? Is it a quote? Is it a poem? So that's all you would write. You would write quote or quote from so-and-so or painting from so-and-so, and that's what will go in this box. In this column, what is it saying / what does it suggest? Essentially, you want to look at the whole thing and tell me what the image or what the message is of this source? What does the person who created the source want you to know? And then we have positive or negative. So does this source paint African life in a positive or negative way? So we're looking at African life in the 1500s. Is it positive? Is it a good thing? Or is it negative? Does the source make it look bad? And then you have an extension. Remember, extensions are always optional. You don't have to do them, but they will push your historical understanding. Do these sources agree with your idea of African life in the 1500s? So this is all about preconceived notions. What ideas do you have about what Africa might have been like in the 1500s? Do you think it was similar to what English life was like? Because as we know, in the 1500s, that was the Tudor period. And we spent a lot of time looking at that. Okay, so source number 1. A quote from the website for the International Slavery Museum. The peoples of West Africa had a rich and varied history and culture long before European slavers arrived. They had a wide variety of political arrangements, including kingdoms, city-states, and other organisations, each with their own languages and culture. Art, learning and technology flourished, and Africans were especially skilled in subjects like medicine, mathematics and astronomy. So take a look at the table that we're trying to answer. What is this? Well, we know it's a quote from the website from the International Slavery Museum. What is it saying? What does it suggest? Well, you could give a quote to show what it's saying and then go on to explain that. So a quote you might want to take is, Africans were especially skilled in subjects like medicine, mathematics and astronomy. Or, the peoples of West Africa had a rich and varied history long before European slavers arrived. All of those are part of the message that this website is trying to give out. And then our final column, positive or negative, is the information here making African life at this time look good or bad? Okay, you only have to give a one-word answer. It doesn't have to be explained. However, if you want to explain it, you absolutely can. Okay, so take some time now, pause this video and fill out that first row of answers for source 1. And when you come back, we are going to move on to source 2. Okay, so here is source 2. Now, I would like you to look very carefully at this source. It's possibly one of my favourites. It is so vibrant, so colourful. The costumes are so intricate. And if you take a closer look, you can see some of the instruments that are being played. You can see here someone is walking along with a lion. There's a horse. So maybe the relationship between people and animals is something that's very strong, something that's very prioritised. So again, pause the video here, take a look at the intricacy of the costumes. Does this look like a very developed civilization or does it look very simple? What suggests that to you? So in your table, I'd like to know what it is, what the message is, and whether it's positive or negative. And once you have completed that, unpause this video and we will move on to the third and final source. Okay, and finally, source number 3. Now, you may have recognised this source because it's something we looked at in the starter activity, but we're going to spend a little bit more time looking at it. I would like you to spend some time looking at the materials, looking at the structure, looking at the size. You can see this building, compared to a normal person, is absolutely massive. Do you think this is intimidating? What does this try to show people? Is it showing weakness or is it showing strength? Is it showing power and wealth or is it showing poverty? Think of where this is built. Would they have had bricks like we have? Or have they been innovative to try and use the materials that they have around them to create this magnificent display of power? Take some time, analyse this source, pay special attention to some of the details, really think about what the message of this building is. Now, one more thing I want to mention. When it's what is this source, we are looking at what this actually is. So you wouldn't say a picture, we would say it's a building. But obviously, I can't take you there. Okay, so this source, I'll give you this one for free. This source is a building. Okay, so pause the video, complete your table, and we will move on. Okay, so we have some ideas of what African life was like pre-slavery, so in the 1500s, pre-transatlantic slavery. We have two sources or two interpretations from philosophers. Now, you might be asking, what is a philosopher? Well, a philosopher is someone who spends their life and spends their career thinking about how the world is created. So they come up with theories and ideas of how the world works and potentially how it should work. So they're very deep, they're very observational. They tend to look at people and how they are functioning and base their ideas off of that. Now, some problems with that, you could say, are that they're very limited. In the 1500s, would people be able to travel? These are written in the 18th century, so the 1700s. Would people be able to travel as much? We're going to read through these two sources or interpretations, and I would like you to answer these questions on your worksheet. So there are two that you have to answer. What do these two interpretations suggest about pre-slavery Africa, and why might they feel this way? Where did these opinions come from? So you have those two questions, and then you have your extension question. Again, you don't have to do the extension, but it will challenge your historical abilities. So how do these interpretations differ from what we know about African life before European slavery? So that's all about comparing other people's ideas to your own knowledge. So let's have a look at these interpretations then. Source 1. A quote from a Scottish philosopher called David Hume in the 18th century. I believe Negroes to be naturally inferior to the whites. There scarcely ever was a civilized nation of that complexion, nor even any individual in action or speculation. They have no arts, no history, no science. Okay, some very difficult things to read there, and we're going to unpack them in a moment. But let's have a look at source 2. A quote from philosopher Immanuel Kant in the 18th century. African people are vain and stupid, capable of only simplistic emotions and unable to learn anything other than how to be a slave. They have shown no talents or presented anything of praiseworthy quality in art or science. Now, first things first, we are very, very aware that both of these interpretations are strongly, strongly racist and very, very inaccurate. But these are the quotes from these people, and these are ideas that a lot of people had in the 18th century. And what we're trying to find out is, why did people think that way? Why were people so scared of different? So, number one, what do these two interpretations suggest about pre-slavery Africa? Well, I'm hoping you have some very strong ideas about that question. Number two, why might they feel this way? Where do these opinions come from? Now, yes, they are racist opinions. We 100% know that. But we need to think, why did they come up with these ideas? So let's break it down. Think about the 18th century and the 1700s. What access to transport do these people have? Where are they able to travel? If you're wealthy, you may be able to travel to other countries. If not, which most people were not wealthy, you would stay in your country. The only people who would have access to places around the world are people who transport goods. Tradesmen, merchants who take their ships, travel to other places and purchase products. This is where their knowledge comes from. And because a lot of British people may not have seen many people of colour in their country before, they would perceive them as very, very different. Now, if you see something as different, you tend to be cautious of it. You tend to be wary of it. If you are seeing something different and you are in a position of power, you may even feel threatened that they might change the way things are done. If a person in power is scared of how something might change the way things are done, that person in power is going to try and get rid of it, is going to try and hide it and stop it. And that is what we're seeing here. These opinions are coming from a place of uneducation, a place of fear of change, a place of not understanding or not being willing to understand something that is different to what they have experienced before. And then if you want to have a go at the extension question, you can read it up there. How does this differ to what we know about African life before European slavery? So think about what you knew already. Think about your experiences and think about the images we looked at in the starter and in the first few activities. Pause the video here and answer those questions and come back to me when you are done. So what did European people think? Let's have a specific look at this man, David Hume. He's a Scottish philosopher, as we spoke about earlier, and he wrote a book called Of National Characters. I would like you to have a look at this image and tell me on your worksheet, what impressions do we get of David Hume from this information here and his image? If you saw just this and this, what might you think of him? You can use a couple of words to describe or a sentence or a summary. Okay, lovely. So we already have one idea of who this person might be. Let's have a look at a little bit more information. Here's a quote from his book. I am apt to suspect the Negroes to be naturally inferior to the whites. Now, I want us to have a look at the definition of Negro. A member of a dark-skinned group of peoples originally native to Africa south of the Sahara. This is a controversial term to some people, which is absolutely understandable because even though it doesn't itself have a hostile meaning, this word has a lot of history attached to it. Okay, so it was used as an attack. It was used as a bad word. It's kind of like how we don't call things gay anymore because that suggests that it's a bad thing. But I'm giving you the definition of this because you will see this in a lot of writing from these philosophers. David Hume, Immanuel Kant, there are several sources from this time period that we're looking at that use this kind of language. So I just wanted to make you aware that even though, it doesn't have a horrific definition, it's not a word that we use nowadays because it packs a punch and it has a lot of history and a lot of horrible meaning behind it. So having a look at this quote, black people are naturally inferior to white people, I would like you on your worksheet to write down how your impression, how your understanding of this person has changed after reading what David Hume wrote in his book. It may well be the same as what you thought up here, but hopefully this quote has slightly changed the way you see this person. I'd like you to, on your worksheet, write your next interpretation down and we will move on. Okay, so what was Britain like at this time? The time period we're looking at is from 1400 to 1800. This is when the Transatlantic Slave Trade started out and when it started to hit its peak. So this covers in Britain. The 1400 is the end of the Middle Ages. We spent a lot of time looking at the Middle Ages in year 7. 1500s fall under the Tudor period. 1600s we're looking at the Stuarts, and 17 to 1800s we're looking at the Georgian era. Now what I'd like to do is on your worksheet make notes on what you think life was like throughout this whole time period. I'd like you to specifically consider, how did people travel? What places did people visit? How did they communicate with one another? Where did they learn about the world and who was giving them this information? And what was society like? Okay, now you may do some individual research. If you want to Google these questions, that's fine. But I am not looking for a really long copied and pasted explanation. I want a summary. If you wanted to, you could just give me your guessing ideas. That is absolutely fine too. You could say, how did people travel? Well, I think it was very long. I think it was very difficult. It took a lot of time. There wasn't much transport available to people. You could put those kinds of things and I will be fine with that. So spend a little bit of time really thinking about these questions and imagining what life would have been like at this time. How did people get information from one another? How did they travel around the world? Did they know what was around the world? So lots of things for you to think about. All of this is going to be done on your worksheet and we will move on. So why are there so many extreme misconceptions or misunderstandings? We know that Immanuel Kant and David Hume were severely misled in their understanding of African life and African culture at this time. However, looking at the last activity, we can perhaps understand why there is a lot of misinformation. People didn't have access to knowledge the way we do nowadays. People didn't know what was going on around the world. People didn't even know that certain continents or countries existed at this time. So like we said earlier, anything that's different or anything that feels threatening, people are going to want to go against. So what I'm asking you to do is write a Peel paragraph explaining where these vast misconceptions about African life and African people come from. You have a point, evidence, explanation, and link back to the question. Your point sentence starter, I think European misconceptions about African life come from ... Evidence, I think this because I know that ... This is where you're going to put knowledge. Explanation, this means that. And then finally, therefore there are vast misconceptions because ... So take some time to complete your Peel paragraph. And finally, using the knowledge you have gained this lesson, I'd like you to answer the following questions in your exercise book. What was Africa like pre-European slavery and how do we know this? What were the European misconceptions about Africa at the time and why did people have misconceptions about Africa? Finally, the last question I'd like you to focus on is how has your opinion changed throughout this lesson? Now you can say it's changed significantly, you've seen things that you didn't previously know about, or you can say my opinion hasn't changed because I knew all of this about Africa. So tell me, has this lesson changed the way you view things? And if you want, you can also explain it. And that is everything for now. Please comment on the task if you have any questions. Remember, please complete this on the worksheet. I know I've said it many times, but that is really, really important. And until next time, stay safe, keep washing those hands. Goodbye, Year 8.